whatever you're going through that makes you feel ashamed or broken or like you're the only one, you're not. There are so many other people that are dealing with this, and it's also to understand that it's not your fault. That there's a lot of reasons why you might have gotten stuck in this habit or behavior. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. There's multi-billion-dollar porn industry, there's the societal norms around this, but it is my responsibility to change. And I'm not alone, and I can get support. And that just doesn't make you a bad person. Watching porn doesn't make you a bad person. But at some point, you have to break free from it. You have to say, hey, this isn't healthy for my life. It's not supporting the life I want to live, and I need to make a change.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Lipkowitz, and with over 12 years of meditation experience as a mindfulness trainer and coach for high performers, I've become obsessed with helping people break free from compulsive, unhealthy behaviors and addictions and step into a life of true freedom so that they can finally become their best selves and cultivate deeper and lasting fulfillment. I've created Unhooked, the Breaking Porn Addiction podcast, to give you simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies to master your mind and optimize your life. This is Unhooked.
So hey everyone, welcome back to Unhooked. Today's conversation originally aired on another podcast called Read Between the Signs, and the host was kind enough to let us share it here. We had an open and honest conversation about porn addiction, what it actually is, how it shows up in people's lives, and why it's so misunderstood. We also got into how it can affect relationships, confidence, and mental clarity, as well as how shame keeps people stuck and what recovery really looks like. I think you will really enjoy this episode. So without further ado, please enjoy this conversation between myself and Read Between the Signs.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Read Between the Signs. Today I have a really exciting guest on, and definitely a conversation that needs to be opened up, as I don't feel like this is something that is spoken about enough these days. Today we have on an expert, and he is amazing at what he does. He helps people recover from porn addictions. So I'd love to welcome Jeremy onto the podcast today. How are you?
Doing great. Happy to be here.
Good, amazing. I want to start off, which may seem like quite a silly question, but what would you define as an addiction? What is an addiction?
Yeah, it's a great question that we're kind of dive straight into the definitions, because it's really important, because there's a lot of misconceptions around particularly porn addiction or other behavioral addictions. And there are some people who make this claim of you can't be addicted because it's not a substance. There are many ways to define addiction, but one of the kind of basic ways to define addiction is any kind of behavior, habit that you continually do despite the negative consequences it brings into your life. So if it's some habit that you keep doing even though it's causing harm, then you could classify it as an addiction. You can also kind of look at, is there a sense of you're trying to quit, but you are not able to? So let's say you're trying to quit smoking, but you can't quit smoking. That also can kind of add to that definition. But really, it's this looking at the overall effect on some habit or behavior. If it's causing harm and you continue to do it despite the harm it's causing, then you could classify it as an addiction. So with that lens, we can look at things like gambling addiction, shopping addiction, some of these more behavioral addictions. And it's very well understood now that these types of things are addictions too, in the same way that smoking cigarettes or, using cocaine can also be addictive. And they act on the same neural pathways. I mean, it's the exact same kind of neurobiology underlying both of these things. They work on the same reward pathways in the brain.
Yeah, 100%. That's defined really lovely and in a great way, because I also do feel like if you bring up these conversations, people think I'm not addicted to porn, I just watch it here and there. But
Uh-huh.
it makes me maybe question, well, how long could you maybe not do that for? And how would that show up in your current life? Is it something that after a few days you're going to be really desperate to do again? Or is it going to be something where you're just not feeling like your best within yourself? Um,
If I could just touch on that for a little bit, because it's a
yeah, of
really
course.
important point that you bring up. One of the reasons that porn addiction is so misunderstood is that a lot of the consequences of porn addiction or of porn use are things that are subtle or long term. So they don't necessarily show up right away. And a lot of people don't realize the consequences of porn. So a lot of people do have this opinion of, well, what's the big deal? I just watch it, a couple times a week, and it's not really that big of a deal. It's normal. Everybody does it. It's not causing that much harm in my life. The problem is that many people don't realize the ways that it's impacting their relationships, their intimacy with their partner, their ability to focus and concentrate, their level of self-esteem and self-confidence. There are so many subtle ways that porn can impact your health, your relationships, your mental clarity, but it's very hard to see unless you're actually really paying attention and looking closely. So there are a lot of people that just don't realize. And so that's getting back to that addiction definition. It really is looking at the overall impact of something on your life. When you look at the overall benefits it brings and compare it to the harms that it causes, because there are many substances that will bring some benefit, but the question is, are they causing more harm than they're bringing benefit?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So let's dive into a little bit more about why did you begin this and where did this all start with you and your journey and your own experiences as well?
Yeah, so for me, it started with my own realization that I had a problematic relationship with porn. I started realizing this when I was in college. So I was around 23, 24, 25 years old when I started to notice some of the effects of porn in my life. So once I realized that I had a problem, I started walking down a path of recovery and tried to figure out a way to break free, and eventually did break free from this addiction. That happened about 13, 14 years ago at this point, and it fundamentally changed my life. It really made a lasting impact on my life. And so now I devote my time to helping other people do the same, not just to breaking free, but just to realizing the ways it's impacting. Because again, so many people just don't realize how it impacts relationships or how it impacts your intimacy or even little things like your physical health, that your sleep quality, your immune system, your ability to focus and do deep work. There's so many ways that breaking free from porn and just not using it actually benefits your life. And
Yeah.
again, this is something so many people have, especially men, started watching at a young age when they were 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, and have used it on a near constant basis, maybe on a daily basis, if not every other day. And so a lot of these guys just don't realize what their life could be like without it because they've been swimming in that water their whole life.
Yeah, 100%. Porn is something which is so accessible, and literally we all carry a phone in our hands or in our
Hmm.
pocket, and it's that easy to access now. Now, when you just mentioned there about affecting relationships and things like that, I recently saw something which actually said that porn addictions can cause things like erectile dysfunction, and performance in sex as well can also be affected from excessive porn use, watching porn. Um, is this true?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's one of the common impacts of porn addiction, watching too much porn. And we saw, there was a recent research article that I was reading that looked at erectile dysfunction in young men and showed that essentially before the advent of tube sites or the kind of high speed internet porn, the occurrence of erectile dysfunction in men was around 1%. And I think it was like 1 to 2% in men before modern high speed internet porn was introduced. But since then, it's gone up to around 37% in young
Wow.
men.
Wow.
It's like 37%. I forget the actual statistics, but something like 30 to 45% of young men experience some form of erectile dysfunction in the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years that's happened. And so it's just this massive increase coming from from porn. And the way that it works is that when you're looking at porn, porn is such a dopaminergic substance. It's what we call a supernormal stimulus, meaning it's an amount of a stimulus of something that's rewarding that we would never have experienced in our evolutionary history. For hundreds of thousands of years, you would never come across something that's that stimulating in terms of how it affects your physiology. And so it's this super normal stimulus. And what happens is the more you use something like that, you get habituated to it, to the point where in order to get the same feeling of dopamine, of all those feel good chemicals, you need a much higher level of stimulation. And so when a guy is used to hardcore internet porn on tube sites, and he uses that for 10 years, and then he goes and tries to have regular sex with a human in person, it just doesn't do it. He's not stimulated enough, and so he can't get an erection. He can't maintain an erection. A lot of it is around this kind of lack of ability to get an erection. A lot of guys experience delayed ejaculation. They can't keep an erection. It's really can be quite damaging for men, and then that impacts their self-esteem as well.
Yeah, of course. I think to me, it's crazy to hear that from watching something like on your phone can actually cause problems turn up in your physical life. And it just blows my mind that these things aren't spoken about enough, because they, like you said, that 35 to 37% of young men is now affected by this. And that's a huge amount of young people to have that sort of issue at such a young age. Usually it's not, young men that have those sort of issues, but it obviously comes down to porn, and something definitely needs to change of how accessible it is and things like that. But going into how accessible it is, I was speaking with a few of my male friends, and they were talking about algorithms and
Hmm.
how when they scroll, they would put not interested on, like, the things you see, like the twerking videos, the half naked images, the OnlyFans models, you name it.
Hmm.
No matter how many times they will put not interested onto these images and videos, they will still show up. What is
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, it's such a funny topic. So, when you're on something like Instagram or TikTok, you can click the video and say, I'm not interested in stuff like this.
Yeah.
The problem is these social media companies, it's a huge industry, right? And there are billions of dollars being spent on trying to make these apps as addictive as possible. And so they've created these algorithms that really figure out what keeps you on the app as long as possible. And so it's not simply like what you click and like. Those are some of the things, but they can even see, if you're on TikTok and scrolling through videos, and then you pause and linger on a video for 2 seconds longer than you do on the other videos, the algorithm is subtly learning that, ooh, he paused on that video for an extra 3 seconds. There must be something in that video. And with hundreds and hundreds or thousands of data points on you, they can figure out, oh, even though he says he's not interested in the twerking videos, whenever we show him a twerking video, he lingers on it for an extra few seconds. And
Yeah.
so, what I tell guys is like, you have to not only tell these algorithms you're not interested by using the not interested button, you have to show them with your actions that you're not interested. Whenever it comes up, you just swipe right past it.
Yeah.
So it really can be, hard to overcome. You mentioned the word accessible, and it's actually one of the reasons that porn is so highly addictive. It has what we call the 3 A's of porn addiction, which is that there are these 3 things about porn that make it incredibly addictive, these 3 A's. So they're affordability, accessibility, and anonymity. And it's these 3 characteristics of porn that make it highly, highly addictive. So affordability means it's free. The more affordable a drug is, the more addictive it's going to be. If you have to spend $10,000 to take a hit of something, it's not going to be very addictive because you're not going to be able to get access to it that much, right? But if something's free, then it means there's no barrier, to accessing it. That leads the accessibility. Again, the more accessible a particular drug or behavior it is the more addictive it's going to be. So if there's something that's maybe free, but it's hard to access, it's hard to get, it's not going to be very addictive. But with porn, it is everywhere. Everybody has a smartphone, and you can get access to porn within seconds simply by whipping out your phone. So it's free, it's affordable, it's accessible, and it's anonymous, meaning it is very easy to hide from other people. It's very
Yeah.
easy to, isolate, and nobody knows that you're watching porn.
hmm Yeah, 100%. Going into hiding it, is that a maybe sign to somebody they may be addicted if they're hiding it from, you know, whoever, maybe their partner, or maybe just watching it on, like, hidden tabs, for example? Or is that a sign maybe that they could be addicted if they're trying to hide it?
Absolutely. I mean, hiding, having secretive behavior, living a double life, these are all signs that you have an addictive, compulsive relationship with it, and that it is something that is causing harm in your life. If you're hiding it, particularly from your partner, from your loved ones, obviously there's nuances to that, right? Like, not watching porn at work is a healthy thing. Like, you don't want to just, show your coworkers the porn you're watching, right? So it's like, there's some nuance there. But yeah, if you're hiding it, if you're trying to pretend that you don't watch it, and your partner asks you, hey, do you watch this? And you say, no, 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 I don't. But then you do it in secret behind your partner's back. That's definitely a huge red flag to look into, that, hey, maybe I have an issue here.
Yeah, 100%. I speak with like a lot of my girlfriends about this sort of issue, and it's a tricky one to tackle, really, because as a woman you kind of think, well, I guess everyone does it. Is it normal? You kind of question yourself, and if you do find that, it's a weird way, it's a weird feeling. Like, how do you feel? Like, if they lusting over another woman, does that class as cheating? Or there's so many questions that go into it when we have these conversations as women. um
hmm
what are your opinions on that? A majority of your clients that you see, are they in relationships as well, and all of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, two really good questions. So, is porn cheating? You also, it's also, there's a topic of, is it normal? Because there's the normalization issue, which, for better or worse, it's where we are at in our society, where it has been normalized, where we have this idea that, oh, watching porn is normal and everybody does it. The
hmm
question is, even if most people watch it, does that mean it's healthy? And that's a more important question to ask, because a lot of people do watch porn, and it's more common than we realize. It doesn't get talked about a lot, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's right, or that it's healthy, or that it's therefore okay. And so for, the guys that I work with, a lot of the time I just try to help them make their own decision about, is this healthy for me? Is this leading to more positive in my life and in my relationships, or is it causing more harm? And
Yeah.
most people make the realization that it just causes more harm than it does any good. If you try to stack the benefits it brings, it's really just like distraction, a little bit of pleasure, and then all the negatives, causing a rift between you and your partner, reducing your energy, your motivation to actually accomplish other things, potentially getting, you know, losing financial, losing finances if you're paying for things, getting into illegal content. There's so many potential ways that can be damaging. Uh,
Mhm.
to look at that question of, is it cheating? It's a really tough question, because I've worked with so many couples, and every couple has a different stance on it. There are some women who are totally fine with their partner watching porn. They just don't want him to hide it. They don't want him to lie about it. They want to make sure he's not getting into anything unethical. But they don't have a philosophical stance against it. And I know there are also many women who are not okay with their partner watching porn, that for them it does feel like cheating. It does feel like infidelity. And I don't have a stance on it. I'm not here to tell anyone what they should believe. I'm
Yeah.
here to promote conversation and honesty. What's most important, especially for the guys that I work with, is find out what your partner believes and then have honest conversations.
Yeah.
That's the only way to have a healthy relationship, is to be on the same page and to be vulnerable with each other.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really good way to put it as well, because, like you say, every relationship is different, and what might be for one couple might not be for another, um, which is really interesting.
One thing I'll just say about that, because I imagine a lot of your listeners are women, and
Majority, yeah.
one of yeah, and it's what's really interesting is that for men, most men discovered porn when they were 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, and it has been a near constant companion since they were a child, long before they met their current partner, right? And it's helpful for a lot of women to understand that if they discover their partner has a hidden porn addiction or a hidden porn habit, maybe it's not an addiction, but just an unhealthy habit. A lot of times women will think, oh, this must be about me. I'm not good enough. I'm not attractive enough. Is something wrong with me? Or it becomes a very charged kind of personal insult. But to
Mm,
realize that for most men, it has nothing to do even with sex. It's a coping mechanism for dealing with stress and anxiety, that it's a habit that they developed when they were 7, 8, 9 years old to provide emotional comfort for themselves when they needed it. And it's just carried on into adulthood. And it likely has nothing to do with their partner, that it is more of an issue that has lived on in the silence, because we don't talk about it. A
mm,
lot of
mm.
men never get it addressed, and so it's something that they just keep in secret their whole life. So I think that's just helpful for a lot of women to hear that it's not necessarily about you. It's probably not about you. It's something that your partner picked up, when he was young, and thought it was just normal, and it's just been with him ever since.
Yeah, that's really good. You actually answered my next question, because I was going to say to you, if you do find out that your partner's maybe doing this, what would your advice be? But I feel like you've answered that really well. So I do also
Well,
want to
let
ask.
me let me touch on that a little bit, because
Yeah,
there's,
go on.
I think a really important thing. If you're a woman and you find out, or you suspect that your partner is watching porn and he's not telling you, um, having a conversation is really important, and in particular, having a safe conversation where you approach it not from a judgmental or blaming or like an inquisition. Are you watching porn behind my back? And how dare you watch porn? But to be really curious and open and let him know that you're just curious to know, kind of, does he watch porn?
Mhm,
What is his relationship with porn? Does he still do it? How often? Is he comfortable talking about it? Is it something that he feels uncomfortable talking about? Most guys feel very uncomfortable talking about it. They feel very ashamed of it, even if they think it's normal. And so, from a partner's point of view, if you can create a safe container and say, "Hey, I'm not here to judge or to blame. I'm just curious. Like, what are your views on porn? Do you
mhm.
think it's okay? And do you watch it? And how often? And I just want to get to know it, you know? So that's what I would say, is start with that safe conversation.
I do feel as well, even regardless of finding out if they watch it or not, I do feel like it's maybe a conversation that couples could or should be having. Just so if something comes up later on the line and they wasn't aware of it, I think it's a good thing to be aware of, regardless if they are watching it or not. It's probably a good conversation to have. Um, I know you just brought up their shame. Do you feel like shame maybe holds a lot of people back from opening up and being honest that maybe they actually do have an addiction?
1,000%. Shame is one of the biggest uh, cages in addiction. It is one of the things in addiction that keeps people stuck in the addiction.
Mm,
It might even be the most important thing, that when you feel shame, what's going on is you feel fundamentally broken inside. You feel like there is something wrong with you, and that if other people knew about it, they would kick you out of the tribe, they would shun you, they would call the police and tell the world what a monster you are, and you would be, kicked out from your community. And that is not a safe place to be in terms of our psychology, like being kicked out. for hundreds of thousands of years, it meant certain death. And so this feeling of shame can feel like a life or death situation for a lot of guys. It just feels like, oh my God, I'm dirty, I'm broken, I am disgusting. And if people knew the truth about me, they would not love me, they would leave me. And because of that, it causes people to isolate. It causes people to hide what's going on, to not seek out connection, to not seek out community. And that is the pathway to liberation from addiction, is being connected, being in community, being vulnerable with others, not isolating. So shame 100% is one of the things that keeps people stuck in the addiction.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like shame may be hand in hand with this term that I've heard before. I'm not too sure though, so it'd be great to get your outlook onto this. It's can be can come across quite crude, this term, but I've heard it as the post-nut clarity. What is that? Is there any science behind that? And yeah, what actually is it?
Yeah. Post-nut clarity is after you orgasm, whether it's masturbation or sex. A lot of times what happens is after you have achieved this thing that you've been kind of lusting after, this, oh, okay, I want to orgasm. The moment you orgasm, you kind of come to your senses in a certain sense. You wake up because there's no longer this tunnel vision lust for whatever it was that you were pursuing. And what can happen is you look around almost as if you've just woken up from a trance, and you realize maybe some of the mistakes you've just made or the unhealthy decisions that have just transpired, the things you've done where you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just did this, or I can't believe I've been sitting here for 3 hours watching porn in a pool of my own sweat. What am I doing with my life? So the post-nut clarity, it is kind of a crude term, but there's some truth to it, which is this moment just after where you just realize, what have I been doing with myself? Like, have I really let my lust take over me and cause me to do things that I now regret?
Do you not
So
feel
that's
like
a little
this?
bit, yeah.
Yeah. Do you not feel like this sort of, I don't know if you would say it's a feeling or an emotion, but does that not maybe help stop people to watch it? Because it's confusing to me that it's such a big sense of like regret, but then you'll go back and
Yeah.
do it again. So what is why is that?
Yeah. It's a great question. It's a very insightful question that you're digging into. The problem is, in that moment, let's say a guy has just been on a 5-hour porn binge. He said, okay, I'm not going to watch porn anymore. I'm done with it. And then he gets drunk and goes home and is watching porn till 3 a.m. and kind of wakes up to it at some point and has this realization, like, what am I doing with myself? That can be a very painful experience. A lot of clarity can come from that moment. The problem is that sometimes, just as we talked about with shame, that can lead to a feeling of shame, of self-hatred. I am such a piece of shit. I can't believe I've done this. Oh my gosh, I'm the worst. I've just spent 3 hours watching porn. I'm so horrible. And that shame, the self-loathing, the self-hatred, causes him to want to escape that feeling of shame, that feeling of self-hatred. And so he needs to act out with something else to numb the pain of that shame. So it might be through food, it might be through video games, it might be through alcohol, or more porn and more sex. So sometimes it's a vicious downward spiral. That's the unhealthy, toxic shame. There is a healthy component of shame, a healthy form of shame, where you have this kind of remorse, where you say, this is not how I want to live. And there is this pain of realizing how far you've fallen.
Yeah.
And that pain can actually be a strong motivating factor. And this is one of the things I try to teach guys how to do, is how to, and it's not just for guys, it's for everyone trying to change any habit or behavior, is how to tap into the healthy side of shame that says, wow, that thing I did is not skillful. It's not how I want to live. And I want to use the pain of that experience to actually motivate me to not act in that way again. But in order to do that, you have to let go of the toxic shame. Toxic shame is the kind of shame that says, I am a bad person. Healthy shame is the kind of shame that says, that thing I did is unskillful, is not healthy. And I don't want to do that again. I don't want to cause that harm to myself or to other people again. So
Yeah.
that moment can go either way. It's one of the reasons why rock bottom can sometimes be kind of a springboard for people's recovery. It's a deep experience of that pain.
Yeah. It's a really good and healthy way to go about something 100%, because like you say, you may beat yourself up about feeling so wrong, or however they may feel about their addiction that they are struggling with. But to identify that shame can also be a good thing, because you are identifying maybe something is wrong, is an amazing thing. Are there any common emotional or psychological triggers that you see often in people that you work with?
The sad part is that it's everything. It's like
Mm.
any emotional trigger can lead to acting out with porn, and because porn addiction, any addiction really, but especially porn addiction, it's a coping mechanism for dealing with emotional discomfort or unmet needs. And so any emotional discomfort, any unpleasant emotion that someone is experiencing, they might try to use porn as a way to self-soothe or to medicate that emotion away. So that being said, there are a lot of common ones, things like boredom, stress and anxiety, loneliness, self-judgment and self-criticism. All of these things are strong triggers for men to act out with porn. Or anyone,
Mhm.
women have porn addiction as well. And so it's like when we experience boredom, for example, we're at home, we're kind of bored. Maybe it's a cocktail of different unpleasant emotions. Maybe there's boredom and loneliness. We're bored and we're like, oh, and I don't have a partner and I'm home alone. And what am I going to do with myself? And I don't like this feeling. So let me just numb out, right? And it might be food, it might be alcohol, it might be going out partying and drinking. For a lot of people, it's staying home and watching porn.
Yeah. 100%, because like you say, like we both have said, how accessible it is. It's easy, it's right there, right in front of you. And I do feel like this is probably one of the hardest addictions to come through with, because it's free, it's so easy to get a hold of. You can keep it a secret like super easily because it's on your phone, it's your private belongings. Um, so I do feel like, yeah, this is one of the
And
addictions. Mm.
yeah, and one of the other reasons it's so hard is it taps so deeply into something that is so beautiful and primal about being human, which is our sexuality, because sexuality is a beautiful, wonderful, amazing part of being human. And it's a strong drive in all of us. And so when you have a multi-billion dollar industry tapping directly into this strong primal drive that we have for sexuality, it's going to be a very, challenging addiction to overcome.
Yeah, 100%. So, one of our themes of Read Between the Signs is actually spirituality. And is there any aspect of that you can resonate with? I have seen briefly some of your meditations and your breath work and things like that as well. And is there anything that you find spiritually connected to?
Yeah, I mean, for me, yeah, Buddhist meditation, mindfulness was part of my recovery journey. It was one of the things that really helped me overcome my addiction. I ended up going on many, these silent meditation retreats. I ended up ordaining as a monk in Myanmar for a while. So
Amazing.
for me, spirituality, meditation, mindfulness, self-compassion, connecting to something greater than yourself is a huge benefit to recovery. And it doesn't mean you have to be religious. It doesn't mean you have to be quote unquote spiritual. For
Hmm.
me, my background is in genetics and the sciences, and I'm not a particularly kind of religious person. Um, Not at all, really. But for me, learning how to tap into the power of my mind, how to understand my mind and cultivate healthy mindsets like compassion and contentment and gratitude and being of service. These are things that genuinely bring deeper fulfillment to my life. Because that's, especially for Buddhist philosophy, a lot of it is around just living a more deeply fulfilling life. Like, what are the things in your life that lead to deeper fulfillment? Do more of those things. And what are the things that lead to suffering? And do less of those things. And you can cultivate a mind that habitually feels more deep inner fulfillment. That was, for me, a huge turning point in my recovery, was learning about neuroplasticity and the connection between mindfulness and neuroscience. And that, there's this one quote that changed my life. I was reading this book, and there was this phrase by a neuroscientist that said, neurons that fire together wire together. And it's this understanding that the more frequently you use certain neural pathways, the stronger those pathways and those thought patterns become. So if you're constantly thinking thoughts of anger, like, I hate this person, I hate that person, you're hardwiring the neural pathways of anger, and you're making anger a more likely thought pattern in the mind. But you can use mindfulness to intentionally cultivate healthier mind states. So if you want your life to be filled with more gratitude or contentment, you can simply strengthen those neural pathways through intentional practice. And so that's really what a lot of Buddhist meditation and mindfulness is about.
Yeah, that leads on to my next question quite well, actually. I wanted to ask you, what daily habits or routines helped you the most staying out of your addiction and becoming clean from that? And what would you advise to someone else as well who's maybe going through the same thing?
What I would advise, and this is very much mirrors my own, what helped me most overcome, my addictions. Getting connected is one of the most important things. Learning how to be vulnerable and be around other people and get support, to get real accountability. It's so hard to practice recovery or to even just change your life and improve your life on your own. It's very hard to do it without support. So if you can find a community, whether it's, a women's group, if you're a woman, or men's group, whether it's an intentional community, a religious community that you vibe with and connect with, finding people who want to support you and lift you up. Maybe it's just joining a gym where there's a good sense of community and people encourage each other. But really, getting connected with others, learning how to be vulnerable and how to get accountability is really important. Mindfulness is also a huge, benefit for recovery, in part because you have to have some level of awareness in order to take action. If you're not aware of your habits and behaviors, you can't actually act on them and improve them. You're just looking at them after the fact. So mindfulness, cultivating like a daily mindfulness habit, even if it's 5 minutes a day of just sitting down and watching your breathing and learning how to work with your mind, can give you that present moment awareness to then act on a behavior or to pause before reacting so you can choose how you want to live. And that is invaluable.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you feel like accountability is a huge part of it? Obviously, it only starts with you, who understands that maybe you have the addiction, but do you feel like maybe people aren't taking accountability with maybe their addictions, for example?
I would say you have to, before you get accountability from other people, you have to take ownership. So ownership is an important piece. And what I'm hearing behind that question is, what's the point of accountability if you're not actually taking ownership and realizing that you have to do the work, right? And so definitely you have to take ownership that this is your problem to solve. If you don't want to break free, nothing anybody else can do will help you.
Yeah.
If you live in denial of your addiction or your unhealthy relationship and you say, it's not really an issue. Yeah, okay, I'll get these people to support me, but I don't really think I need to change. Then you're just wasting your time getting accountability. You have to first own up to the fact that you have to want to change. And that's the ownership component. And, it's kind of mixed in with a little bit of self-accountability, like holding yourself accountable. But it is valuable to get other people to hold you accountable, because sometimes we can't do it on our own because we get hijacked. Our amygdala gets hijacked. We get into that fight or flight or freeze state, and we just want the thing that we want, or we want to run away, and, we're in that triggered state. So accountability is important, but yeah, first you have to take ownership.
Okay, yeah, 100%. Do you think we're ever going to see a change, like within the porn industry, or how accessible it is? Because my opinion at the moment, with the things that I see online and social media, is it's just going crazy. Like the things you see are just wild. Like, I even hear
Yeah.
podcasts about how the porn industry has been exposed to, there's some people who are actually in these videos without their consent. Do you ever feel like there's going to be a change in this?
Yeah, I was just kind of laughing at what you just said, because it's like, I've heard some stories that maybe there are some people in these porn videos without their consent. It's not
Yeah.
maybe. I mean, there's documented cases of thousands upon thousands of people, not just without their consent. I mean, there are just straight up videos of rape,
Yeah.
really horrible things, underage, children being abused on Pornhub, all these major sites that people think, oh, this is Pornhub, this is, OnlyFans, this is totally respectable. And it's just not. I mean, they're just real documented cases of sex trafficking, of abuse, of rape. It's just really horrible stuff. If anyone's interested, I would check out Layla Mickleweight. She's one of the people. She wrote the Takedown, I think, but she's been big on kind of trying to get more attention on what's going on behind the scenes of Pornhub. So there is a lot of horrible stuff. Do I think it's ever going to change? I do feel that things are getting better in the sense that there are more people, like the fact that we're having this conversation. There's more podcasts, more men are stepping up and saying, being role models for other men and saying, hey guys, this isn't healthy. This isn't, this is not really in integrity to act this way. It's not normal. It's not okay. Not from a shaming perspective. We didn't even really talk about the fact that, like, there can be a lot of sex shaming type of approaches, maybe from a highly religious perspective of, oh, porn is evil and sexuality is evil and this is bad. But I think there's a lot of, people coming forward who are saying, hey, we're sex positive, we're kink positive, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everything you see is healthy or okay. And there's a balance there. There's a nuance. So I do think things are getting better, but I also think that, things can also get worse, especially with the
100%.
advent of AI technology, AI videos, VR headsets, and AI girlfriends. And it's going to be a really complicated future.
Yeah, I think it's a really scary part of, this that we're going into at the moment. We're going into AI and high advanced technology and things like that as well. It's scary to see where we might end up, but I'm really hopeful that, the cases that we've heard on Pornhub are, they're going to do something about it, hopefully, because I've even seen documentaries and podcasts myself about people who'd been trafficked, and the way their families had found them was actually through finding them on Pornhub, which is just tragic, absolutely tragic. So yeah, hopefully it changes, and I hope that we'll see something positive, and if people do want to access porn in a healthy way, it should be not through things like Pornhub, when they're doing things like that. It's very scary, a very scary time. So my last question I want to ask you is, if you could say one thing to someone now who feels stuck in an addiction, what would you say to them?
Probably the most important thing that I would say is just to let them know that they're not alone. That whatever you're going through that makes you feel ashamed or broken or like you're the only one, like you're not. There are so many other people that are dealing with this, and it's also to understand that it's not your fault. That there's a lot of reasons why you might have gotten stuck in this habit or behavior. what I like to say, it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. And that's a really good, it's a balance you have to find. Like, okay, it's not my failing, like a personal failing and my fault that I got hooked onto this. There's multi-billion-dollar porn industry. There's the societal norms around this, but it is my responsibility to change. And I'm not alone and I can get support. So just knowing that you're not alone and that this doesn't make you a bad person. Watching porn doesn't make you a bad person. But at some point you have to break free from it. You have to say, hey, this isn't healthy for my life. It's not supporting the life I want to live and I need to make a change.
Hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. Jeremy, it's been such an amazing conversation and definitely one that needed to be had. It's great that you do speak about the things that you do because conversations like this do definitely need to be spoken about more. So yeah, I'm really grateful for you and thank you for coming on. Where can anybody who may be interested in finding you find you?
Yeah, I would say the best place is just to check out my podcast, the Unhooked
Yeah.
podcast. It's valuable stuff for men and women. I mean, I talk a lot about porn addiction, but it's really applicable to any kind of habit change or behavior change, whether you're stuck on, Netflix or food, or you're addicted to going to the gym. It's like it's all the same kind of underlying dynamics. And so on the podcast, we interview experts in relationships and habit science and talk about all kind of good things. So check out the Unhooked podcast on Spotify, Apple, anywhere you get your podcasts.
Amazing. Great. Thank you, everyone who's tuned in to this episode of Read Between the Signs, and we'll see you soon again for another episode. Bye.